This is the last part of test 2 preparation. Hypothesis testing questions. Use the given statement to represent a claim. Write its complement and state which is HO and which is HA. So he gives you mean is greater than or equal to 569. What is the complement? It's going to be less than. So when you state them, you have to look for the null hypothesis that has greater than or equal to, and the alternative that has less than. And which one would that be? Right here in G. Determine whether the hypothesis is left-tailed, right-tailed, or two-tailed. Well, you look at the alternative. What's the sign in the alternative? It's greater than, it's a right-tailed. If it is a less than, it will be a left tail, and if there is not equal, it will be a two-tailed test. Okay. According to a recent survey, 73% of college students use the student loan to pay for college. He wants us to state the null and the alternative. Hypothesis. Let be the proportion of college students who use student loans to pay for college. What's the claim? Well, it says it is 73%, so it must be equal. How do you state the null and the alternative? Then equal and not equal. And where is the claim? The claim happened to be in the null hypothesis this time. Alright, so next question. Describe type 1 and type 2 errors for the hypothesis test of the indicated claim. A clothing store claims that at least 75% of its new customer will return to buy their next article of clothing. At least means greater than or equal to, and the claim happened to be in the null hypothesis. What is type 1 error? Type 1 error means when you reject the null hypothesis when it is true. So a type 1 error happens when actually the proportion of customers is at least 75% who return to the store to buy a new article of clothing, but you end up rejecting that. And actually it is the first one. A type 1 error will occur when the actual proportion of new customers who return to buy is at least 0.75, but you reject it. What's type 2? Type 2 error is when you fail to reject HO when it is actually false. Okay. So you fail to reject HO when it is actually false. And it's gonna be a type 2 error when the actual proportion of customers who return to buy their next article is more, okay, it's the last one, but you fail to reject HO. Okay, a security expert claims that less than 17% of all homeowners have a home security alarm. State HO and HA. Less than 17% should be in the alternative hypothesis, so the null hypothesis will be greater than or equal to. So the null hypothesis is this, less than, not the null hypothesis, not HO, let's look it up. Okay, so if the alternative is less than 17%, the null will be greater than or equal to 17%. And that's going to be this one. And the alternative hypothesis is going to be less. It's going to be this one. The hypothesis test is left-tailed because the alternative hypothesis contains what? Less sign. So this is very nice exercise, guys, to guide you through stating the null in the alternative and know whether the test is left-tailed or right-tailed test. Remember, left-tailed test, the alternative has less than. Right-tailed test, the alternative has greater than. And two-tailed test, the alternative has not equal to. Determine whether the claim represents the null hypothesis alternative. How would you interpret the decision that rejects HO? How would you interpret the decision that failed to reject HO? Okay, as scientists claim that the mean incubation period for the eggs of a species of bird is more than 47 days. More than 47 days means greater than, so the claim is in the alternative. So since the claim does not contain a statement of equality, it represents the alternative hypothesis. Anytime you have an equal, greater than or equal, or less than or equal in the claim, then it is the null hypothesis. How should you interpret a decision that rejects the null hypothesis? If you reject the null hypothesis and the claim is not in the null hypothesis, is in the alternative, you support the claim. So there is sufficient evidence to support the claim. How should you interpret a decision that fails to reject the null hypothesis? If you fail to reject the null hypothesis and the claim is in the alternative, then you don't support the claim. Insufficient evidence to support the claim. I have this summary with the 4 scenarios that I made available to you. Check it out in week 10 page and how to state the conclusion. Your medical research team is investigating the mean cost of a 30-day supply of a certain heart medication. A pharmaceutical company thinks that the mean cost is more than $59. You want to support this claim. How should you write the null and the alternative? Anytime you want to support the claim should be stated in the alternative. And he says it's more than 95, so mean is more than 95, and this is what? Less than or equal to 95. The p-value for a hypothesis test is shown. Use the p-value to decide whether to reject HO or fail to reject HO. Remember, if the p-value is less than alpha, we reject HO. If the p-value is more than alpha, we fail to reject HO. Look at this p-value here. It's 0.0796. It's bigger than 0.01. If you use alpha 0.01, it's bigger, so you fail to reject HO. It's bigger than 0.05, you fail to reject HO. But for 0.10, p-value is less than 0.10, you reject HO. So your answer for A, fail to reject, for B, fail to reject HO, and for C, reject HO. Here the p-value is given on output right here. You can see it, 0.2120. And alpha is 0.1. Well, p-value is bigger than alpha, you fail to reject HO. Alright. Use technology to help you test the claim about the population mean mu. At a given level of significance alpha, use the given sample statistic. Assume that the population is normally distributed. Here is the claim. Here is alpha. He gives you sigma. When he gives you sigma, you have to use a standard normal distribution, Z. You cannot use T. Please remember that. I've been emphasizing on this a lot. If there was an S here, sample standard deviation will be a T. But this is sigma, you must use Z. So it's a Z test. What is the null in the alternative hypothesis? The null will be, if this is a greater, the null will be less than or equal to 1150, this one. Okay, so let's do the calculator now. Stat, tests, first test, Z test. You see mu0, we're testing against 1150. Sigma, you see there is a prompt to enter sigma here, not S, 203.82. So if I give you a question like this, guys, and I give you sigma, you should know it's a Z test, not a T test. Remember that. X bar 1176.94. Enter. N is 300. Mu, what's the alternative sign? The alternative sign is greater than. Make sure to select it and press enter. And then hit calculate. And Z is 2.28. So it's 2.28. 2.29 if you round it to 2 decimal places. And the p-value 0. Oh, I made a mistake. I should have chosen greater than. I didn't choose it properly. Let me redo this. I thought I did press enter. Oh, I didn't. See? How did I know that there was a mistake? I saw that on the screen. Now it is selected. There you go. So Z is 2.29 and p-value is, now the p-value was too big. P-value can't be that large on the previous screen. 0.0110. How many decimal places? He says 3, so 0.011. Determine the outcome and conclusion of the test. 0.011 and alpha 0.09, which is less than alpha, so you reject HO. Okay, the conclusion. If you reject HO and the claim is in HA, you support the claim. So just find for the language that supports the claim. At the 9% significance level, there is. You only use there is not when you fail to reject HO. Enough evidence to, he's going to ask you support or reject. As I told you during the live session, if your claim is in the alternative, you select the word support. That's it. And so there is enough evidence to support the claim. A nutritionist claims that the mean tuna consumption by a person is 3.8 pounds per year. A sample of 80 people shows that the mean tuna consumption by a person is 3.6 pounds per year. So N is 80, X bar is 3.6. Assume that the population standard deviation is 1.04. So he gives you sigma, guys. At alpha equals 2%, can you reject the claim? He didn't ask you if you can support the claim because the claim is in the null hypothesis. When the claim is in the null hypothesis, you will never have a question asking you to support. He will be asking you to reject. So that's a hint for you guys to know that the claim is in the null hypothesis. So it says the claim is 3.1, so that will be B. Okay, let's run the Z test. All right. Mu 0 against 3.8. Sigma is 1.04. X bar is 3.6. N is how many? 80 people. And we have to choose not equal to here because that's the alternative. And let me do a draw here. Okay, so the test statistics is negative 1.72. The p-value is 0.0854. So 0.085. He wants 3 decimal places. Okay, what's alpha? 0.02. Well, the p-value is bigger than alpha, so you fail to reject HO. When you fail to reject HO, you say there is not enough evidence. 2, let's decide whether it is support or reject. Where the claim is in the null, we have to use the word reject. So there is not enough evidence to reject the claim. It's between C and B. There is sufficient evidence, so it can't be this. There is not sufficient evidence to reject the claim. Okay, here, use a t-test. You cannot go and use a z-test. He's asking you to use a t-test to test the claim about the population mean at the given level of significance alpha. Okay, you have a mu greater than or equal to 7900, so that's the null hypothesis. So what would be the alternative? Less than. So let's find that one. It's going to be this. Okay, let's run the test stat. T-test. Mu 0 is what? 7900. Enter. X bar 7600. S is 450. a good way to prepare you for the test, guys, that you do those problems. Mu is what? Less than. And make sure to select it and press enter here. Now it is selected. Remember, the claim is in the null hypothesis. So our conclusion is not going to have the word support. It's going to have either reject or fail to reject. Calculate. T is -3. The standardized test statistic T is -3 point, how many decimals? 2 decimal places he wants. So -3.27. What's the p-value? The p-value is 0. How many decimals? 3. So 0.002. Okay. Conclusion. 0.002 is less than alpha, so we reject HO, and there is enough evidence to, since the claim happened to be in HO, to reject the claim. So let me look for this language. There is enough evidence to reject the claim. That must be a consumer group claims that the mean time it takes for a sedan to travel a quarter mile is greater than 14.8 seconds. So if you want to state the null in the alternative, it's a mean here. That's the mean. Greater will be in the alternative, not in the null. 14.8 seconds. And here it will be what? Less than or equal to. The claim is the alternative because it says greater than. Okay, look guys, this is a hint for you. He says T equals. So that is a t-test. It can't be a z-test. But let me tell you why it is a t-test. A random sample of 20 sedans. So n is 20. So let me just prepare the test here. Okay, so we're testing against 14.8. A random sample of 20 sedans has a mean minimum travel to travel a quarter mile 15.5 seconds. So put 15.5 seconds. And a standard deviation of 2.09. He didn't say population standard deviation, so that must be S. N is 20. At alpha equal 10%, is there enough evidence to support the claim? If he asks you if you can support the claim, make sure that your claim is in the alternative. If you had it in the null, that means you made a mistake. You have to identify the alternative as the claim. Because when the claim is in the alternative, we ask whether we can support the claim or not. And when the claim is in the null hypothesis, we ask whether we can reject the claim or not. Alright, so let's go to the next one, and that's a greater than, enter. And now we hit calculate. T is, he wants T to 2 decimal places, so 1.49. The 7, we're gonna make this a 10, so it will be 1.50. Just be careful with the rounding. Obtain the p-value to 3 decimal places, so 0.075. Okay, what is alpha? 10%, so that's less. Reject. If you reject HO, you say there is, because the p-value is less than alpha. No, not greater than alpha. It's not greater than alpha. Is, he didn't put the word less. He should have put less than alpha, but he put greater than. We say it's not greater than alpha. Interpret the decision. There is. Anytime you reject HO, we start with there is enough evidence at the 10% level of significance. Now we need to decide whether to support or to reject. Since the claim is in the alternative, just close your eyes and choose to support. The claim that the minimum time it takes for a sedan to travel a quarter mile is more than, greater than 14.8 That's the original claim. Just copy it from the original statement of the claim. Right here, minimum time it takes for a sedan to travel quarter mile is greater than 14.8 seconds. All right, for this one, we can do this using StatCrunch or the calculator. So I'm going to do it both ways. Let me key in the data. Okay, so I put the data in L2. The brochure indicates that the mean class size for full-time faculty is fewer than 32 students. So they're making a claim that the average class size is less than 32. So which one would that be here, guys? It has to be D. Find, so test this claim. Can you support the university claim? So your claim is in the alternative. So I put the data in L2. I go to stat. It's a t-test. Let's say, guys, you make a mistake and you put a z-test here. Watch. Let me show you what the issue is going to be. And you have data. Enter. Okay, you put mu032. But look what it's asking you. It's asking you for sigma. We don't have sigma. We don't have population standard deviation. So it must be the t-test. So just go to t-test. You have to select data here because you are given data, mu032. My list is not in L1, it's in L2. So you press the second key and then number 2. Frequency, don't change this one. We need to check if it is less than 32. That's the alternative sign. And calculate. And I got T. Oh, he wants only the p-value. Okay. The p-value is 0.022 if you round to 3 decimal places. Decide whether to reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. 0.02 is less than alpha, so you reject HO because the p-value is less than the significance level. And interpretation. So you reject HO, then you say there is enough evidence at the 10% level of significance to, since the claim is in HA, to support the claim. Just look for this language. There is not this one. It says there is not. To support the claim, yeah? Not more. It says here more than 32 students. We want less than 32 students. So just read the whole thing. Right here, it's C. You see? There is sufficient evidence to support the claim that the mean class size for full-time faculty is fewer than 32. In my live sessions, I use there is enough evidence. Here he used there is sufficient or not sufficient, insufficient. So it's the same thing. Or I said, I want to show you how you could have done this using StatCrunch. So just click here, open in StatCrunch, and go to Stat. T-stat, one sample with data. This is your variable one. What's the null hypothesis? 32. We want to test it is less than 32. You choose the alternative less than and compute. And here you go. This is the test statistic, negative 2.185. And this is the p-value, which is 0.022. Exactly what we got using the calculator, and then which is less than alpha, you reject HO. Okay, so that's how we use the StatCrunch. Next question. Research center claims that 26% of adults in a certain country would travel into space on a commercial flight if they could afford it. In a random sample of 1,000 adults in that country, 29% say they would travel into space if they could afford it. At 10%, is there enough evidence to reject the claim? If he's asking you if you can reject the claim, be sure that the claim will turn out to be in the null hypothesis. Identify the claim. It says 26% of adults. It's right here. 26% would travel into space, into commercial flights into space if they can afford it. Okay, what would be the null? So it's equal and not equal. It will be this one. 26%, so 0.26 and not equal to 0.26. Use technology to find the Z and the P. It's a proportion test. So stat tests, one prop, Z test, enter. Okay, we're testing against 0.26, enter. X. Usually he gives you the sample, which is 1000, and tell you how many in the sample will do this or don't do this, but this time he didn't. He said 29% of them. So in order to find X, guys, you take the 29% and multiply by 1000, which is 0.29 times 1000. Okay, I got 290, and this is 1000. And the next one is not equal to, and we'll go to calculate. This is a two-tailed test. Okay, so Z is 2.16, and the p-value is 0.031 for 3 decimal places. Okay, what's the decision? Alpha is 10%, 0.031 is less than 10%, so reject. When you reject, you start with there is enough evidence to. Since the claim happened to be in the null hypothesis, you use the word reject. I hope that you guys are getting it by now. And that's it. Explain how to decide when a normal distribution can be used to approximate binomial distribution. You have to check that MP is greater than 5 and NQ is greater than 5. We did that in 1 or 2 examples. A human society claims that at least less than 61% of households in a certain country own a pet. So less than 61%, it's right here, that's the claim. Okay, less than 61% is going to be in the alternative, so the claim is in the alternative, and the null will be greater than or equal to. So right here, this is the less than 0.61. Use it as a decimal, and 0.61. Okay, let's run this one. It's a proportion. Once he's asking about the percent, guys, don't use Z or T. It's a proportion test. Okay, so 0.61. What is X here? He says in a random sample of 700, 413. So 413 is X. The smaller number is X. N is 700. Less than. Make sure to select that properly. Enter. And let's do a draw. So Z is negative 1.08. P-value is 0.139. And it's bigger than alpha, more than 10% definitely. So what do you do here? Fail to reject. Okay, what did I say? If you fail to reject the null hypothesis, start with there is not enough evidence. What did I say in the previous exercises? If the claim is in HA, you use the word support. So there is not enough evidence to support the claim. Okay, that's it. That's the review of chapter 7. I hope that you find it useful.